He's the former president and publisher of the Sun Herald, and now he's on the radio. Welcome to Coast Vue with Ricky Mathews on SuperTalk Mississippi Gulf Coast 103.1.
I hope you're having a great day. Welcome to Coast Vue, the show that celebrates the men and women who are making coastal Mississippi a better place to live, work, and play. And as we've done the last few days, we're focusing just a little bit more, as you know, on the coronavirus situation. And my hope for all of you is that you're continuing to focus on what you can do to protect your family, and that so far you're all doing well. And as we go forward with this show, we're going to continually focus with each of our guests on what the impact is and what does it look like when we get on the other side of this, so we can preserve the jobs and get the economy rolling again and all the things that we need to do. There's a lot to think about. We're going to think about jobs and the stress on the healthcare system and the stress on the nonprofit community and the stress on leadership. But we've been here before. We've faced disasters before, the BP oil spill, Hurricane Katrina, many other hurricanes. We're resilient people. That's one of the reasons this is such a special place to live, work, and play. And I can assure you, even though this is a different kind of a storm, we've faced storms before. And as I've repeatedly said, we will get on the other side of this. We're having actually a really good and timely conversation today with Clay Williams. We're going to have a Coast Vue session with my old friend Clay Williams, who is one of the young people of the storm, actually. He falls in that category with Joe Cloyd and Brian Sanderson and Ashley Edwards. There are others that we'll be talking to, but he has a key role as the executive director for the Gulfport-Biloxi International Airport. And he's been on an interesting journey that took him from Mississippi State to Harvard to working for Trent Light and a lot of points in between. I can't wait to share with you his journey. And then he's got some up-to-date information about the impact on the airport and the airlines as we are facing it today. So without any further ado, welcome to the studio, Clay.
Glad to be with you, Ricky.
It's good to see you again, buddy.
Thank you for having me.
Man, I mean, I think back, it's been since, we knew each other before the storm. Certainly we got to know each other better right after the storm. This is Hurricane Katrina. But, 15 years have gone by. Wow. You still look young, though.
Well, we try.
I asked you, how old were you when you were working for Trent Light? And you were about 30, right?
Yeah, after Hurricane Katrina, I was 30 years old, and my wife and I had been back here for about 3 years, living on the Gulf Coast. Mm-hmm. We had been in Washington prior to that, and once the hurricane hit, we were in recovery mode, and it was a great position to have at the time because you were really able to help, and we were actually able to take the lead of so many of our mentors there. So if you think about the likes of you and Jerry St. Pay and George Slowell and other leaders and our statewide officials that were on the ground, we were just pleased to be able to play a part in that and help with various efforts.
I look forward to hearing more of that story. Yeah. It's really fascinating, and I'm really thrilled that you landed in the position that you're in today. So the coronavirus has a lot of unknowns still attached to it. We still are making sure that we flatten the curve, that by doing this social distancing, we're trying to keep the curve from being steep, where we're passing it from person to person rapidly, so we don't overwhelm our healthcare systems. And so, frankly, if families pay attention closely and learn what they need to learn, they maybe pass through this without actually getting the coronavirus. So, a lot of energy is around that. But a lot of economic development people that I'm talking to, they're still they're operating from a position of strength because they've worked in a position where they've been very aggressive to help coastal Mississippi over all these years. So when you think about the public-private alignment that they have now, they're in a good position to assess the situation once we get on the other side to say, okay, what has closures done to us? What does this mean to us economically? And how do we get back on our feet again and back on path, actually, to this bigger vision they had about making coastal Mississippi so viable for the long term? In the case of the airport, though, I'd like to cover right off the bat.
Sure.
In the case of the airport, you guys have had some immediate impacts for a good reason because of this whole social distancing thing. Right. So what's the current thinking? How has this impacted the airport? How has this impacted the airlines that you're doing business with?
Well, the travel industry as a whole has been dramatically impacted by the spread of the coronavirus. So you mentioned social distancing and having to remain apart from your neighbor. You mentioned, the uncertain time of air travel. So if you think about it and you go back when the virus was first introduced, you had travel bans from Asia. We've seen travel bans from Europe. We now are looking at reduced capacity being implemented by the various carriers across the United States. So the different measures have been underway over the last couple of months, but it's really here in South Mississippi, and in particular in the United States, has hit its peak over the last week and a half.
Mm-hmm.
So really, if you think about it, let's take a step back. If you look at Gulfport-Biloxi Airport, we had a fabulous month in the month of February. We were up 20% in terms of our traffic over the February of 2019. So it was significant.
And what were the segments of that? Like business, consumer. How do you break that out?
Sure. So if you really think about the economic drivers in South Mississippi, what drives air travel? There are really two major sectors. One is the defense industry. Obviously, it's the military travel being driven by Keesler Air Force Base, the Naval Construction Battalion. It's defense contractors. It's Ingalls Shipbuilding, who's really our largest corporate utilizer at the airport. It's the Associated Defense Contractors and Federal Contractors at Stennis Space Center. So that whole segment of our economy drives air travel, as does the casino gaming industry. So that's another significant piece of the business at the airport.
So February was a really good month.
February was a great month for us. And if you really look the last 3 years and think about where we've been, so take a step back. When you go to the economic recession that we had, you look what followed the economic recession, you had mega merger after mega merger in the airline industry. So you had this constant consolidation and reduction in capacity. And so that hit the airport, and it hit small airports in particular. So we've had to see some we have seen some growth trends since then. And if you really look at the last 3 years, we saw 7% growth year over year. If you were looking at 17, in 18, we saw 11% growth. And then this past year, we saw a 6% increase. And then, as I just mentioned, in February, we were up 20%.
Wow.
So you ease into March. And March, the first few days, you kind of see normal traffic patterns. But as the reports of additional cases of coronavirus hit the news media, you start to see a pullback. Mm-hmm. And then what we've seen just in the last week, you've got the military who have halted all travel until May the 11th, I believe is the date. You've got large corporations that have pulled back on their travel. And then the most recent news yesterday with our casino resorts closing, right there alone, that's a huge driver of traffic into the Gulfport-Biloxi Airport. But a lot of people, Ricky, don't realize that approximately 25% of the air travel at Gulfport-Biloxi International are charters. And so you have a few casinos in the market, in particular one that's driving 23% of that traffic, and then you have another that's driving another 2% of that. And if you look, those entities closed their doors yesterday for an indefinite period of time. Mm-hmm. So today actually are the last charter flights operating to and from the airport. So there's a 25% reduction right off the bat.
And the thing is that, I shared a story earlier in the week from the Washington Post. It was an analysis of the different types of approaches from quarantine to significant social distancing.
Right.
And social distancing is the one tool we have that can flatten the curve. Sure. And hopefully get us over the hump rapidly so we can get on the other side of this. And so hopefully this is a case of short-term pain for long-term gain, as opposed to this thing really stretching out and all of the general populace eventually having to deal with it in one respect or another. But if you look at your crystal ball, there's really no way to know how long the impact will be for you. It really depends on what it looks like on the other side and when that is, right?
It's unclear at this time, but as you mentioned, if people will follow the guidance, I think it helps for a more rapid recovery. So
Yes.
one of the things that we were talking about in recent weeks was, we implemented, when the coronavirus spread started, we implemented enhanced sanitation and cleaning procedures at the airport. So we were looking at those high traffic areas, your escalator handrails and your elevator buttons and your stair rails and that sort of thing, making sure that those were cleaned and sanitized and done on a more frequent basis. So we were looking at that. We were talking to our tenants and other passengers that were going to be flying. You look at the CDC guidance. Cover your nose when you cough, when you sneeze. Wash your hands with more frequency and regularity. And so those were some things that we were doing, all the while kind of watching what the trends were that were occurring with the carriers.
So if you think about, when you talk about reduced traffic, then it affects all the ancillary support, from rental cars to the people unloading the airplanes.
Absolutely.
And everything in between. So it's just pretty dramatic. So why don't we do this? Let's close out the segment on Corona when we come back from the break.
Okay.
And then I want to kind of trace your steps,
Sure.
because you have a unique path that brought you here in this current role, and I think it could be an inspiration to other young people who are looking for sort of what their path might be.
Right.
So anyway, this is Clay Williams, the Executive Director for the Gulfport-Biloxi International Airport, and we'll continue the conversation after this break.
Thanks.
Listen live or on demand and watch episodes of Coast Vue on your laptop, desktop, or on your phone or tablet by going to SuperTalk.msgulfcoast.com.
Talking to the people that help make the coast such a unique place to live. This is Coast View with Ricky Mathews on SuperTalk Mississippi Gulf Coast 103.1.
Welcome back to Coast View. We have Clay Williams, who's the Executive Director for the Gulfport-Biloxi Regional Airport Authority. And we were talking about before the break the coronavirus impact. They were up over 20% in February. And already they could tell mid-March, as we put the social distancing in place, the military and the casinos and tourism and everything else begins to kind of get caught up in the moment of social distancing, that the impact on the airport has been significant, expected significant though. So why don't we do this? Before we shift to your story, Clay, I want to understand sort of the residual impact and how the responsibility you and your authority have for master planning what recovery might look like. So let's kind of walk through that.
Sure. So if you think about the Gulfport-Biloxi International Airport as an entity, it has a $299 million annual economic impact in South Mississippi. And if you think about the jobs that are associated with the facility, you have 650 jobs associated with the airport on the commercial side. And then if you go over to the National Guard side of the airfield, you've got another 650 jobs. So it's a significant job generator and creator in this state, and particularly in our region, and the annual economic impact is significant. So if you look at something like the coronavirus and sort of the ripple effect or the trickle-down effect that it has. So you have all the associated ancillary businesses at the airports. You've got, look at us as the airport authority. We're essentially a landlord, operating the grounds, operating the facilities, and trying to generate additional economic impact for the community. But it's our partners, the tenants, that are invaluable in this process. So if you think about who are an airport's partners, it's the airlines. It's the rental car companies. It's your retail concessionaire. It's your restaurant concessionaire. It's your federal employees that work for TSA that are at the checkpoint. Mm-hmm. It's engineers and others that are associated with our day-to-day safety and security procedures. It's your air traffic controllers. I mentioned the National Guard side of the airfield, both Army National Guard, Air National Guard. So there's so many entities, even the hotels that are located on airport, the office park that's associated. There's so many intertwined businesses. And most all of those that I just referenced are affected by air travel. So it's driven by passenger volume. It's driven by frequency. So hours of operation are very important. The number of people going in and out of the facility, very important, because that drives the economic well-being of rental cars, of airlines, of those that are working the security checkpoint, and those working in our restaurants at the airport and working in the retail concessions.
Have you already begun to anticipate what a recovery plan might look like?
So we have, and what we, again, the uncertainty is the length of time.
Right.
So when you look at an economic recovery, you have to first start looking at what are your cash reserves, what's your position, how long can you withstand something like this? And fortunately, through great leadership from our board, from the hard work of our staff and our team, we've put together a pretty good base of reserves. But again, without you knowing how long it lasts, that's step one. The other is you start looking at your tenants and how are they managing? Are they having to manage through reduced hours? Are they having to manage through less people on a shift because of the throughput? And so that's something that we have to bear in mind. And then all the while, you've got to think about people taking care of one another and how important that is. Because think about somebody that's trying to work, but yet they've got a more vulnerable segment of the population at home that they're taking care of, whether it's maybe an elderly person or an infant, something of that magnitude. So there's a lot to balance. You hear about economic stimulus at the federal level. I mean, President Trump and the administration mentioned yesterday that their plan is to take care of the airline industry because they've really been dramatically impacted by some of the travel restrictions that have been put into place. But that's all by design and to try to lower this curve and the spread of the virus.
And one of the things that that really occurs to me as you talk is that the airport, the Gulfport-Biloxi International Airport, is literally a microcosm. It's sort of like its own little city with everything attached to it.
Right.
And so, whether you're talking about a casino or the casino industry or the airport and the industries that surround it, casinos, for every job at the casino, you got another job or more that supports the casinos. Directly supports the casinos. And you have restaurants and bars and other amenities that are part of the overall offering for coastal Mississippi. Right. And you can begin to understand that some of these big organizations will get on the other side of this. But if you were already struggling a little bit before you hit this moment,
right,
you're might really be struggling when you get on the other side of this. And so I hope that ultimately our planning as a region is really taking into account all aspects of our economy, so that everyone, not just the airline industry, but I know you think this way because you were in Trent Lott's office after Hurricane Katrina and had to think about every aspect of the economy to see how we were going to get ourselves out of this mess. But there's a I think that what you just told, that story of the supporting businesses and this sort of like mini city in the airport, is just a microcosm of what we're going to face all over the coast.
That's it.
And there's going to be a lot to think about. But we were there before with BP. We were there before with Hurricane Katrina. We'll find our way through it. But again, there's planning and leadership is going to be key. Why don't we shift gears, though?
Okay.
You actually grew up in the Lumberton, Hattiesburg area. You made your way to Ocean Springs, but I don't know how you ended up in Ocean Springs. Tell me about that.
So I actually was born in Hattiesburg. I'm a native South Mississippian, born in Hattiesburg. My father was originally from Lumberton, Mississippi, and we lived when I was in elementary school in his old boyhood home there. He was a banker in Hattiesburg, and he actually was transferred with his job to the Mississippi Gulf Coast when I was entering junior high. So I went to junior high and high school in Ocean Springs. My father worked in banking in both Biloxi and Ocean Springs, and so that's what brought us to the Mississippi Gulf Coast.
Your father had a wonderful reputation, has a wonderful, he's what a legacy he left.
He is definitely a mentor of mine, and he claims me most days.
But he did set a great example for you, didn't he?
He did. He actually believes in the Gulf Coast and in the community. He's been involved in every organization, not only in Ocean Springs and Jackson County, but throughout the Mississippi Gulf Coast, everything from United Way to Chamber of Commerce to Rotary Club to the YMCA. And so his civic involvement has been an inspiration to me, and he's done it, and he's been very altruistic in what he's done, and I have an immense amount of respect for him.
I can see that. I can definitely see that. How did you pick Mississippi State?
So when I was looking at various schools, I was hoping to land in a place that, one, was a good fit, one that had a program of which I might have an interest. And so I actually went through the Department of Communication there. I had through their public relations department. And really, Mississippi State has a very laid-back feel to it. The people are very friendly and welcoming, and when you visit as an 18-year-old high school student, I just felt like it was the right thing to do, and really enjoyed my time while I was there.
So from there, you got serious, though. You went to Harvard.
Well, actually, there was a step prior to that. So when I got out of school, my goal was I was looking at various opportunities in public relations and advertising. That was my degree. That was my area of interest. And so the thought was, where can I land in a mid to larger size firm where I could have a broad array of experience? So I started interviewing, sending out resumes kind of blindly to different firms of which I was aware. And at the time, I had a friend from Mississippi State who was working as an intern in Senator Trent Lott's office. And she encouraged me. She said, send your resume to the office here because the chief of staff may be able to help you get in the door with a couple of these firms in D.C. Well, little time went by. I'd sent my resume in. I had not heard anything back, and I waited. And 2 or 3 weeks, I pick up the phone and I call, and I said, well, I was just checking to see if my friend had forwarded along the resume, and have you had a chance to possibly reach out to any of your contacts? He said, let us check, and we'll call you back. Well, they called back about 2 days later. I don't know if they actually made the phone call to any of the advertising and PR agencies of which I had an interest, but they called back and said, look, we have a temporary position that's opening in Senator Lott's office. Would you like to come to Washington and work? And while you're here, we'll give you the time to look for another position because this is temporary.
Yeah.
Well, I thought I was taking a temporary position, and long and the short of it is I ended up working for Senator Lott for almost 9 years in various capacities at different times. So my first jobs in D.C. were everything from a month in the mailroom to legislative correspondence to then becoming a legislative aide.
Really learning from the ground up?
Ground up. And so you kind of working long hours trying to wrap my head around various policy issues. And I started working on special projects in Mississippi. And so it really was interesting. You had a chance to help various entities throughout the state. And
so we're gonna continue that, and then I want to, after the break, we'll finish up sort of your story, what brought you ultimately to the airport,
sure.
And then I want to hear the structure of the airport. Sure. Like who serves on the current airport authority and all those kinds of things. But we'll be back in just a minute with our conversation with Clay Williams, the executive director for the Gulfport-Biloxi International Airport Authority. So we'll be back after this break.
Follow SuperTalk Mississippi Gulf Coast 103.1 on Facebook. Facebook.com/SuperTalk MS Coast 103.1.
He's the former president and publisher of the Sun Herald, and now he's on the radio. Welcome to Coast View with Ricky Mathews on SuperTalk Mississippi Gulf Coast 103.1.
Welcome back to Coast View. We're having a terrific conversation with Clay Williams, the executive director for the Gulfport-Biloxi International Airport Authority. We had a kind of an interesting conversation about how he went to state, ultimately went to work for Trent Lott, but we haven't talked about where Harvard fit in. So let's talk about that. When did you go to Harvard to get your master's?
I had been in Washington, D.C. for 2 years. As I was mentioning, we had worked on a variety of special projects, and 2 areas that were assigned to me were both transportation policy and education policy. And for education, I was tasked with trying to help our universities grow their research and development budgets. Transportation, I was tasked with trying to help improve infrastructure throughout Mississippi, whether it be at airports, whether it be road and bridge infrastructure. And so Harvard had a degree program, administration, planning, and policy. And you could do half of your coursework at the Kennedy School of Government, half of your coursework at the School of Education, where you could sort of tie in a policy degree and also had the option of potentially going into higher education at one point in time. So we looked at both of those and applied to various schools. was frankly shocked that I got in. I figured that, they needed a few Southerners in the program, so therefore they allowed me to come aboard. It was really an interesting program, though. We had students in the program from 46 states in 9 different countries, and so having that kind of was a really unique experience for me, one that I enjoyed, having been from South Mississippi, having worked for conservative members of Congress with both Senator Lott and also my time I spent on the House of Representatives side with Representative Chip Pickering. You look at that, and then you go to Harvard. Little bit different mindset, a little bit different approach, but
it's good to get the perspective.
All in all, a good experience. I enjoyed it. But
you learned how to disagree and still respect each other, didn't you?
Well, absolutely. I mean, there are always going to be differing points of view, and the key is to be able to come about some sort of compromise. I mean, you see today there's this divisiveness and oftentimes a bitterness. From the time that I had an opportunity to work in Washington, the time I was there in graduate school, it was just a little more sense of, not a little actually, a great deal of camaraderie and compromise. I know in working for Senator Lott, working for Congressman Pickering, they reached across the aisle. They worked very well together. While they were both staunch conservatives, they still were able to get things accomplished. And we as team members of theirs, staff members, were taught, if you can get 55 or 60% of a deal, take it.
Yeah.
Don't expect to get everything.
And Trent Lott wrote his book "Herding Cats" about that. I mean, it's about finding the bipartisan solution. That's the only way you can get anything done.
That's it.
Unfortunately, we're not able to find that. Hopefully, and it does assume the coronavirus is now enabling us to do that in some way. But you were in a really, when you think about your degree and the infrastructure work you've done in Mississippi and learning from the ground up, when Hurricane Katrina hit and you were in that position as a young 30-year-old, but by then you were pretty seasoned as it relates to, the Washington measurement. You learned a lot about life and how to help a community and the role of government and how it all fits together after Katrina, didn't you?
Well, being in the position that we had, you had the ability to help cut through tape. You had the ability to help expedite process. And so really we were fortunate at that time. You think about Hurricane Katrina when you had Governor Haley Barbour in his leadership role. You had Senator Thad Cochran in his appropriations position. You had Senator Lott in a leadership role. Being able to utilize as staff members their positions to help expedite and serve people and do it in a more rapid fashion was really fulfilling. It was a challenging time, Ricky, as you well know, but it was one that this area is resilient. This area had a plan, and we saw ourselves through it, and really was just pleased to be able to play a really small part in that.
Well, some of the conversations we've been having, it's important for people to realize that those muscles that we developed during those times, whether it be Katrina or the BP oil spill or other disasters that we've had to face, are going to be very useful to us in the coronavirus scenario, because we've seen what a temporary deficit might look like.
Absolutely.
And we've seen ourselves through it. In other communities like inland, they might have faced downturns in the economy, but they've never faced these sudden jars to the economy that cause you to have to marshal all resources and find bipartisan solutions. And hopefully not only can our community come together, because we've sort of built those muscles to do that, but the nation can come together and utilize that as well, so that we can, all together, find ourselves on the other side of this.
Absolutely.
You saw a lot of people really focused on helping us get through that Katrina situation, though, didn't you?
Yes.
Yeah.
If you think about the help that we received after Katrina, go back even farther than that. Look at 9/11.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
And you think about what occurred during 9/11. Happened to be living in Washington at the time, but what got people through that? Because it was an uncertain time. There was a lot of fear. There was a lot of anxiety, but patience. Mm-hmm. People being patient with one another. People being kind with one another. People trying to help their neighbor. Same thing occurred with Katrina. Worst natural disaster in our nation's history, and there was this outpouring of support. I was amazed time and time again of the groups that not only came here one time, but they came here time after time to try to help. And we were people that they didn't know, but yet they were extending an arm. And so if you look at that, now you look at the coronavirus, again, I think we're going to have to be patient. There's going to be a recovery for many sectors of the economy. But again, it's just taking time, following the guidance, and trying to make it a more rapid recovery.
I think 9/11 actually is a really good example because this is a situation where America was facing the aftermath of that, the uncertain aftermath of that together. And when we think about the markets and we think about the economy and we just think about anyone's life, you think fear, uncertainty, and doubt are the things that really affect all of us.
That's right.
And so the opportunity to really focus on reducing the fear, uncertainty, and doubt, that's going to be our role. And it comes in a bunch of different forms, doesn't it?
It is. There's some sacrifices that people will have to make, and you see people being encouraged to limit groups of no more than 10 and to try to take some additional steps. But again, it's back to just being patient and trying to work through it and following guidance and doing what we can as individuals to
we'll get on the other side of it.
Yeah.
So let's talk about, who is your board? Tell me about your board.
We have a great board at the Gulfport-Biloxi Airport Authority. So if you think about how we're set up, we're a political subdivision of the state of Mississippi. We have a 3-member Airport Authority Commission. We have one appointee from the city of Biloxi. That's Lieutenant General Clark Griffith. General Griffith has a long history in leading military installations around this country. He's a former aviator. You've got the appointee from the city of Gulfport, which is Brigadier General Joe Spraggins. Joe Spraggins has a distinguished history, military history, and his career has been well noted. You know it very well, Ricky. I mean, he was the emergency management director during Hurricane Katrina, started the job, I believe, on August the 29th. He was the base commander at the CRTC, which is located there at the airport. And then the Harrison County appointee is Dave Dennis. And Dave is a tremendous businessman and been a very staunch supporter of all organizations and entities in South Mississippi. He's kind of dedicated his life to service and has been very successful in business. So we're really blessed and fortunate at the airport to have leadership from these 3 gentlemen. If you think about this, military leadership, business leadership, those that have been involved in civic organizations, not only are they giving their time at the airport authority, but they've also done it time and time again with various organizations across South Mississippi.
It's really kind of the dream team, really.
They're great. I mean, they really are, and they're very supportive of the team at the airport. They appreciate what they do. As I mentioned, if you look at General Spraggins and General Griffith, been involved in aviation. So, again, a great group with all 3.
That's incredible. So what is a day in the life of Clay when you don't have the downturn you're dealing with coronavirus? What's the day in the life of Clay look like?
No 2 days are the same. And that's what makes working at an airport incredibly interesting and challenging. And what's really good is you get to deal with all tenants. As I mentioned, you're working with federal agencies, you're working with restaurants, with retail concessionaires, airlines, rental car companies. So the diversity and depth of the work is always fascinating.
I bet it is. So we're coming to the end of this segment. This is Clay Williams, who's the executive director for the Gulfport-Biloxi International Airport Authority, and we'll come back after this break and talk a little bit more about the average day in the life of the authority and what's going on and what's the future look like without coronavirus involved. What are some of the things you've been working on and what are you most proud of?
Okay.
We know what the challenge is, but it will be temporary and we'll get on the other side. But what are you most proud of? We'll come back after this break and talk more about that. Again, this is Clay Williams. See you after the break.
You can also listen live to SuperTalk Mississippi Gulf Coast 103.1 on your Amazon Alexa devices. Once you've enabled the skill, just say, Alexa, open SuperTalk Mississippi Gulf Coast.
talking to the people that help make the coast such a unique place to live. This is Coast View with Ricky Mathews on SuperTalk Mississippi Gulf Coast 103.1.
Welcome back to Coast View. We have Clay Williams, the Executive Director of the Gulfport-Biloxi International Airport Authority. We've had a great conversation about the coronavirus impact on the airport, up over 20% in February, impact in March. We'll continue to see impact on the airport and all the residual businesses that depend on the airport until we get on the other side of this. But the good news is we got really good leadership in the airport board or authority. You call them the authority or the board, which is the official?
They're the Airport Authority Commission.
Okay, so, and then Clay is well aligned with them. They've thought strategically. They're constantly focused on how to build a strong base for the airport and how to increase the opportunities for all of us who take advantage of the airports, so it can be competitive with New Orleans and Mobile and whatever else might be competing with. So what I want to do now, though, I want to just ask you specifically. How long have you been there now?
7.5 years.
Man, that's time flies.
It does fly.
What are you most proud of in your 7.5 years?
So there are a number of things that you could look at and say that you're proud of this or that, but think about really some of the service that we've been able to provide to the community. I'll tell you one of the most interesting things of which we've been a part was the honor flights. So you think about that service that the Airport Authority, we had 7 of those, and we were men and women in uniform who had served this country were able to go and see the memorials in Washington and bring them back through, but being able to welcome them back and see kind of their expression after having been to view the World War II memorial, that was really special. On a day-to-day basis, watching military homecomings, people who have been deployed and overseas that are coming back in to meet and greet families, those are kind of the really unique moments of the job that are very fulfilling. Growing air service, we've been able to do a little bit of that, and we again have a great team that's worked in concert together to do it, and so we've been pleased with that, to have some additional air service offerings for the community. We feel that that's important. Help bolstering cash reserves. I mean, for a time like this, pleased to have been able to do some of that, because you never know when you're going to need it, based on our discussion today. But there are a number of things, but really it's the people. I mean, at the airport that make the job worthwhile. If you think about all the various businesses that are there, we have 45 people that work for the Airport Authority. They understand our mission. They appreciate the importance of it, and they're great at what they do.
Yeah, Clay, in my career, I remember at one point I commuted to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania for 6.5 months, and then this is weekly, and then to Miami for 1.5 years weekly. And then I have brother-in-laws that are in the pharmaceutical industry, and they're flying out weekly today. My flying experience out of Gulfport was always fantastic. There are always going to be those moments when there might be a mechanical issue or some delays in Atlanta or wherever you were connecting to. But as a general rule, I think people who fly regularly have really, you're going to have an anecdotal moment where you have a bad experience. But the reality is, as a general rule, the overall performance of the airport is pretty good, isn't it?
I would stack up the Gulfport-Biloxi Airport with any other small airport in the country. I think we've got a top-notch facility. There are great people that are working there that are taking care of the facilities and trying to make it a top-notch passenger experience. We stress ease, we stress convenience. You can fly from Gulfport-Biloxi and connect one time and go anywhere in the world. I mean, we have service to Atlanta, Houston, Dallas, Charlotte, all your major hubs in the region. And so with that, it's all about making it a pleasant experience. And our tenants help us to do that with different offerings that they have for the passengers. And we always stress to people, use your local airport. If you want us to grow and you want to have additional air service offerings, people have got to take advantage of what we have and not go out of state.
What I have found is for when you combine competitive pricing with the ability to get back in your car and drive home in a short period of time, Gulfport tends to be the preferable option. I mean, it's very competitive.
Sure, it is. Absolutely.
You may be able to fly to New Orleans and get a direct flight to some more places. But the reality is, even if you're going to connect, you might find better pricing here. So,
and we always encourage people, Ricky, if they'll book 4 to 6 weeks out, we're very competitive. I mean, it's just you need to make an advance fare purchase and check Gulfport every time. So,
aside from the coronavirus, what's your biggest challenge?
So it's the nature of the airline industry in general. If you think about, let's look 20 years ago. You had 20 plus air carriers in the United States. You no longer have that. You think of the players that, Ricky, that we had at one point in time: Continental Airlines, Northwest Airlines, U.S. Airways, Northwest Airlines. They no longer exist. There's been one merger after another, and so you have very few carriers remaining. You have 4 airlines that control 90% of the revenue. Those 4 are Southwest, American, United, and Delta, and they control 80% of the market share. So that's the biggest challenge for a small market like ours.
Well, you've done a pretty good job of dealing with that, and as long as your board stays focused. My hope is that we can get on the other side of the coronavirus situation, and that you can get back to 20% gains, because what that would mean would be military's back to normal, casinos are back to normal, we're rolling.
That's right.
And so that actually would be a great barometer. We'll have you back in a month or two and have a conversation about what the current experience is. Thank you so much for joining me. And congratulations to all your success. It's been great watching you over all these years.
I appreciate being on the show. Thank you, Ricky.
This has been Clay Williams, Executive Director of the Gulfport-Biloxi International Airport Authority, and have a great weekend. See you Monday.
Follow SuperTalk Mississippi Gulf Coast 103.1 on Twitter @SuperTalk MSGC.